Hey traders, Merry Christmas. It is Sunday, the weekend of December 24th, and welcome to the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. Let's go ahead and look at the price action for the indexes this week, starting with the NQ. What do you see there, Price?
Well, here on the NQ for the weekly, we had this, good print to the upside. We're, here comfortably at all-time high. On the daily, you can see it came back down to the level and went back up, and we're currently closing in that, you could call it resistance, but it's a real good look to continue upward. We also could see it come back down to support here at about 16,000 or even a little lower based on this level here that was lost and then regained. There's a good spot in here where that makes a lot of sense for it to come down to before continuing upward. So I'm not suggesting breakout buying here, but this is the first area I'd be looking at, and then down here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was pretty telling this week. I mean, it hasn't been the most exciting week. Obviously, it's been the holidays, not a lot of movement, low volume, but it does say a lot that when we had this big, kind of drawdown on Wednesday, that it did respect the previous all-time high level and bounced higher. So that still looks good for continuation in my mind. Like you mentioned, you don't recommend buying here. You'd be crazy to buy here. I mean, we are breaking out to new highs. Even though there has been strength on the indexes recently, it's just you don't want to be buying at all-time high. There will be a pullback at some point. Could be much higher from here, but you do not want to buy at the top. That's just bad practice. I do agree with your levels on where we could come back to. I think this level here, 16,080 on the NQ, is pretty much prime spot. You could see it come all the way down here, even like really quite a bit lower, 15,200s, and it would still look like a great level to go long. I don't think that would be breaking of any upward trend structure either. So we'll just have to kind of see if there's any follow through next week, or if we get that pullback for the end of the year. But until we see some more price action, this week's been kind of boring, just a bunch of consolidation, not much else to talk about. Yeah. What do you think about the ES?
Real similar look there. It did come up to all-time high. It is just a little bit of a different zone on the ES, but it's doing very similar stuff. I expect it to keep going where it is now. It just took a breath there, kind of, if you will, and then it looks like it's going to continue up. We can look at the 4-hour here, and we can see how we had good closes up here above the level that was lost, that was previously held. And if it weren't going to continue up, we would have seen this rejected a little bit faster here on the 4-hour. We wouldn't have seen the closes up above the level. And so that's why it's a compelling spot to buy right there on the 4-hour chart. Now, again, we're not buying tops here, but like a scalp to pick up a few points there makes sense. So yeah, I think it's looking toward the upside. It already did its pullback, but that all depends upon, is it able to produce a higher high here or not? And that's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much see the same. I mean, obviously, that level being a little different than the NQ, that is the all-time high. So the NQ having closed above and kind of using all-time high as support, it does make sense that even though the S&P is lagging behind a little bit, if it reaches that point, it's not going to probably blast through the all-time high, right? So it does make sense to take a breather there, like you mentioned. But again, showing strength by moving almost immediately back up to that level, no reason to be bearish on any of these indexes. And I do kind of want to stress that point one more time. Even though we talk about maybe there will be a pullback here, in the grand scheme, the macro trend is still very much to the upside. I mean, just because we're back at all-time high doesn't mean there has to be a huge pullback. This is potentially what the start of another huge bull run looks like, right? You got to break the all-time high at some point and move higher. So we could be seeing the start of that, and we could see follow through with that in 24, but we'll have to see going forward. Let's go ahead and look at the RTY. It has been another index of consolidation this week, but this one is starting to really show strength even into this resistance level that we marked at 2040-ish, getting our first real definitive close above on Friday. So that looks really nice. And the fact that this consolidation too, it seems to be consolidating upward, kind of drifting upward, another really bullish sign. If I look at a higher time frame here, I could absolutely see it going to 2100 before really kind of having to make a big stand. We've seen before in like the higher range of consolidation before this big breakdown in early 22 rather. That was the area where we saw a lot of wicking down to be using as support, and then when it broke below there, used that exact same area as resistance. So we know that's kind of the key area to look at. You could argue maybe that's a little bit closer to 2150-ish, but we're starting to get into the area where we're going to make or break of the big move here. I'll even go as far as to say that we could see that, get rejected and come back down for support and then blast through there. But, overall on most of the indexes, right, like we're starting to see breakout of these consolidations and moving higher. No reason to be bearish in the short or long term. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this played out basically exactly like we were saying. We expected it to keep moving upward, and that's what's happened. It's these wicks, as they sell off, it just gets bought right back up. Again, really normal stuff when the last time you were in that price range was a couple years ago. So, that's pretty normal for what we were expecting.
Yeah, I think so too. What do you think about gold? Gold's been interesting.
Yeah. The past week it was kind of sideways, but it did make it up above the level it was kind of rejecting every day. And it's closing up and making that higher high. So I do expect gold to continue up on the weekly here. It's not the most impressive close, but it is continuing upward, and that just means it's going to keep going up. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty telling too that you had this new all-time high, 2150-ish, right? And then it sold off pretty convincingly, right? That was a pretty significant red candle, a lot of selling volume. If we even look at the relative volume on that day, very high. I think if you look at that and you were trading on volume or cycles, that you probably thought, okay, we'll probably come down and spend a lot of time consolidating at lows before moving higher. But when we saw this candle right here on Wednesday, 13th, I think that really told you that there was a lot of strength potentially coming back up to the highs. It does make sense that we tapped the previous all-time high and come back. That's a level that makes sense to do that. But given the price action recently, and like you mentioned, kind of closing above the consolidation, I think that we're going to go back to all-time highs sooner rather than later. I see no reason to think that we'll make new lows on this move. You could, but given the price action, I think that we're gonna be breaking back up to the all-time high and retesting soon.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I really like that gap right there. I know it's been filled already. It's just, I love how the wicks were selling off and then it closes up there and the next morning it gaps up. Now it did come back down throughout the day, but it pushed higher and held up above the previous range that was rejecting. So this is a very bearish candle in my opinion.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, bullish.
You mean? Excuse me. I was gonna say, I know what you meant. I was gonna say, if you were a bear, you really wanted that candle. You really needed that candle to be red. You didn't want to see buying into the close like that. So,
right.
Yeah, it looks good. I think we'll see higher on gold. Let's go ahead and talk about the Dow. I think we mentioned last time that the Dow, it doesn't get any love, but it's actually gotten the strongest breakout of all of the major indexes. Interestingly, this week it also has the tightest consolidation. So, it didn't really do anything. Like all the major indexes kind of had that big sell-off on Wednesday, but ended up getting bought up. This is more of a doji candle on Friday, some indecision, so we can kind of see it, potentially could come back lower or move higher. Who knows? We'll have to see. But again, like we've talked about, no real difference here. It would make sense if it came back. It's pretty extended. But again, we're at fresh highs, so it is blue sky up there, up top. Could see it move and just keep blasting higher. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to look at the 4 hour on this one
Sure.
real quick. You can see how it did come back up, and like I mentioned earlier, it kind of rejected it. It didn't come up and close a couple of times in the area that was previously rejected. So I do think we have a good chance of seeing a little bit lower on the 4 hour here. But like you just literally pointed out, there's quite a bit of pullback that can occur here, and still on the weekly be a very bullish situation. So that's not surprising that we could see it come down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you
that
think,
gap
Ben?
there on the 4 hour too, obviously looks like prime. That would be a great area to take along at the top of that gap. That, we're talking about the 4 hour, I mean, that rejection is a lot more cleaner, like no closes above, right? The area that failed. So that does look like that would have been a great short. Especially when you see that candle close green but below, you could have taken a short there on there. On the next 4 hour close, so that looks nice. Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, it's kind of at an impasse for a lot of these major indexes. We're really high, we're extended. They look like they might want to move higher, but it would make sense if they came back. It's been a low volume week, not a lot to go on. We'll just have to see what happens next week for a lot of these. But let's go ahead and move on to oil, CL1. What do you think of oil right off the bat, the price action recently?
Well, it was, it did have this upward movement here on Monday and Tuesday, but the rest of the week it was kind of just sideways. So it is interesting. You can see how tightly they can keep this on these levels here and keep those closes right where they want to be. Now it looks like they may not be looking at this specific level of 73.49, because you can see here this close, or actually that is exactly 73.49. I meant 73.60. Excuse me, I'm getting my
where we have our level marked. Yeah.
So you can see how tightly they keep those closes right there. And that's pretty impressive, because it definitely looks like it's gonna take off here, because it's gaining levels again instead of losing them. So what I would expect is maybe one more wick down, and then it's gonna go back to 80, and then keep going higher. What do you think?
I mean, I think 72. I know we have this trade idea from before, just messing with that. It's not real. 72.50 is like the perfect long, I think. If it comes back here, you can take the trade there, the bottom of the wick there, the top of the wicks there. Looks pretty ideal. Matches up with historical trends as well, around 72-ish. So that looks pretty prime for me with a move back to 80. I think you could take a trade there, and that could be, I mean, you could see the start of oil starting to move back to the highs if that happens. I do think $80 is the level that needs to gain to have a chance of making it back to the highs. That idea that we just discussed, that'd be good for $80. I would probably take some profits there for sure if it made it back.
Absolutely.
And then look for a higher low to add again if I think that the price action looks like it wants to move through 80. But yeah, I think this is as good a level as any to take along. We are back toward the lows of the major consolidation, so why not? Good risk to reward there. We'll just have to kind of see, again, more consolidation this week. We'll just have to see kind of where the price goes. Does it go up? Does it go down? Still think 72.50 is great.
And I think we agree that there's a good chance that was the low there on this.
Yeah,
on
I mean, if you just look historically, I mean, that's where there's only one low lower than those, so why not? It's good. That was like the low back when Russia was desperate to sell their oil for $60.
Right.
So it made sense that was the low. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens to oil. Looks good for higher to me. Let's talk about the dollar. It's been some good follow through to the downside on the dollar. I could see 101.5 being the low here, but I think the major level that really needs to hold here could be as low as 98.50, 98.60-ish. And the reason that I say that is we've already made a higher high, and if we go out into the monthly, you can see there's a lot of kind of consolidation there over a long period of time. We've had breakouts above that, of course, but none that have ever kind of held up until recently. So I do like 98.50 as a potential like needing to go lower to make a new high kind of move. But if we want to keep the trend intact, we need 100 to hold. Like you really need what do we have that marked? 100.8. It's kind of the last area that would need to hold to keep the higher low look intact, in my opinion. However, I do think that even if we go below that, there's still a chance that it reverses and makes a new high. What do you think?
Yeah, I think similarly. I think if you're bullish, you're really looking to keep this whole leg here intact as an upward move. So you don't want your low coming in lower than that, which is exactly what you just said. Could we see a wick down and a hold in order to maximize the confusion on which direction? I think that's a real possibility. But you really want to see this large leg hold up, and on the daily, it looks like it really could. So we'll see. We just have to see what exactly where it holds and produces a higher high from there.
Yeah, I think like when you point that out on the daily, like right there, right on 100, like just using that area right near the low as support for another move up makes sense. And also to point out kind of what you're discussing about, like I could see a wick down and then closing above, something like we saw here in July,
right?
Where it just the monthly close, even though it wicked so much further down than where it closed, ended up closing actually higher than previous lows. We could absolutely see a look like that going into, probably wouldn't happen at this point, right? But potentially January or February, we could absolutely see something like that. That would be a bullish look to see that get bought up. So yeah, I'm with you there. Let's go ahead and talk about KRE. Any new developments on KRE in your mind?
Nope, super sideways. It did hold the level there. It didn't just immediately pull right back. That's interesting. That could mean that it's going to get further than 56, but that's a big level to gain there, and I don't think it's just going to go straight through 56.5 that we've got leveled or marked on the chart.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot of new developments for KRE. The one thing that maybe is good to talk about is just what you said, right? We got another close above the level that we wanted to see gained. Actually, would even say that that's bullish, right? Like it's holding up here, like people are willing to buy up there. I know the candle on the weekly is red, but it's kind of like a narrow range. That's a great sign. I don't see any reason to think that we won't see our 56.50 level. Again, pullbacks are healthy, even in uptrends, so we could see that come all the way back down to 48s, something like that, or even just retouching the previous high at 49.
Right.
And then we could still move up. So I have no reason to be bearish on pretty much any of the things that we've covered, except maybe the dollar in the short term. Yeah, not really too much else to say, unless you have anything that you think that we missed.
Nope. Just that, expect a short week next week. So, the volume might not be there. So that'll be interesting to see.
I think that we probably won't see too much worth talking about until the new year. But on that note, thanks again for tuning into the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. If you like this kind of content, sub to the Hub and consider joining our Trader Hub Discord community server. You can find it using our link in the description. We'll see you next week for New Year's.